If someone that we all, it's all about name recognition, and it could be whoever, it could be a stupid artist that we all know about, whatever the heck it is. It's about name recognition. I mean, it's gonna be interesting with that Cynthia Nixon thing. That should be fun. Get the popcorn out on that one. That'll be fun. I mean, she'll lose, I think. But you never know.
Do you think,
Yeah, she will.
do you think Nixon can give Como damage?
I think she can be I think she can be
No way.
It is a liberal.
What was with the hiring thing?
She has the right name
Do you
identified.
think this,
It's already a campaign song for
do you
her.
think this actress can take on Como and make any damage?
Yeah.
Odds are absolutely not, because those are the odds. If Trump can win in 2016, anything can
Exactly, yes.
Good point.
happen.
Okay, with that, I yield the floor and Mr.
Yeah, so
Siphon away a few
introduce,
votes.
Oh, you ready, Jason?
yeah.
No
Oh,
other
you want,
business.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm good.
You want to do?
Yeah.
Good. I already did.
Control, you wanna take it back? Okay, you wanna go now? Okay,
You can stand right there if you feel comfortable. If you want.
yeah, I'd say ladies and gentlemen, but we have ladies again. But gentlemen, please welcome distinguished speaker, Mr. Jerome Tyler.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Please share your credentials to begin with.
I'm a former assistant professor at Seton Hall University. Boy, how I got away with that for as long as I did. And the author of Locked in America, which began as my doctoral dissertation at the New School for Social Research.
Wow.
That's where I got my PhD, the New School for Socialist Research. Can you imagine?
Socialist.
It's the leading center for the advancement of Marxism on the east coast of the Western Hemisphere. And they gave me a PhD. Little they knew. A book I originally published in 1980 that calls for a nationwide grassroots welfare revolt. That is, in my opinion, is the only possible thing that could rescue this country. There is no other solution. Tax cuts will not do it.
Not alone.
No, not without a welfare
I still support
revolt.
them though.
Oh, absolutely. Anything that reduces taxes is a good thing that should be supported. But you can't be too confident in it, because whether government taxes us to death or goes into such debt, having to borrow, having to inflate, it doesn't matter. It's, choose your poison, drink and die. Unless we start reducing taxes. The thing I emphasize in the book and in all my public talks, by the way, that book, A Lock in America, is deeply scholarly. It was my doctoral dissertation. I wouldn't recommend anybody pick it up. I'm writing a popularized version without all the polemics and scholarly back and forth and everything. That I would recommend the whole country read when I finish it. Right now, it exists as a bunch of essays, the popular version, and if anybody takes my card, which I'll offer, and sends me an email wanting me to just email you as attachments those essays, you'll find them very informative, especially one essay which is not all that scholarly at all. It's popularly written, and it's entitled Jefferson's July 4th Declaration and the U.S. Constitution. What's the connection and what does it matter? And that explains where the country first went off course, first got derailed, and as I mentioned, it comes with the second bill signed into law by our first president. That is where you can trace the origins of the American welfare state. The other thing that's very important for me to emphasize, if we're talking about everything you have, the case against welfare, two things. First of all, the title, Everything You Have, comes from Gerald Ford's comment, again, in debate with Jimmy Carter in '76, a government that is big enough to give you anything you want is big enough to take everything you have. Case against welfare. The second thing I would emphasize with this is that welfare is not just social entitlement programs. Welfare is any bill, any law, any decision that benefits some Americans at the expense of others. That is welfare. So that we are correct today when we speak of corporate welfare and social welfare. I've completed another book-length manuscript that I can't get anyone to publish, it's called The Tragedy of Our History, How the Patriots America Became the Progressives America. And it's the story. And the theme of it is the periodic crises and crashes caused by corporate welfare created the need, the demand, and the excuse for social welfare reform from the Progressive era to the New Deal and beyond. In other words, it had nothing to do with the free enterprise system that we had the first panic and depression in 1792, and all the ones after that, including 1807, 1819, 1837, 1857, 1873, 1893. 73 was the one that led to the Progressive era, and it was all because of the Transcontinental Railroad Bill that was passed when the South left the country and the Republican North passed the Transcontinental Railroad Bill, which created railroads from nowhere to nowhere at public expense. And when the banks that were behind the bill, especially the Jay Cooke Bank in Chicago and in Baltimore, when the railroads were completed, there wasn't anybody to ride out west. It was way too early. It never would have been begun if it were not for the huge land subsidies and cash subsidies Congress awarded to 4 separate transcontinental railroads that did the building. There was no, so the bottom line is, nothing about capitalism or a free enterprise system creates panics, crashes, or anything. It's always built up by government subsidies to corrupt, I call them counterfeit capitalists. And then once the bubble bursts, as inevitably it does, we have all the consequences. It was the bursting of the, I haven't even begun my talk yet. This is scary.
It's not.
It's the bursting of bubbles created by crony capitalism, not free enterprise, but crony capitalism, that creates all the hardship through the country that leads to the demand for progressive reform. And that's how it happened.
Since you haven't really talked yet, I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
You say you're going to write a less scholarly version of Locke in America?
Yeah, it's mostly written.
May I suggest a title?
Yeah.
Lock Her Up America.
That's pretty.
You like that one?
Do I still have to keep the E at the end of Locke's
Of
name?
course not.
Yeah.
Just sounds the same.
Yeah, but I have to, anyway,
Okay.
I'll take that into
Okay.
consideration.
Okay.
By the way, one more thing I do have to answer you. You think that the tax cut is going to create prosperity and the growth of government resources?
Oh,
Are
no,
you
no, no, no,
aware?
no, not the government resources.
No, the growth
Revenue.
of government revenue, yeah,
Growth of
my mistake. But do you realize that since the housing crash of 2008, the Federal Reserve has pumped $11 trillion into the economy?
Yeah, that's not real money, that's
No,
manufactured money.
but that money now is leaving the financial markets and entering the marketplace. And which means the initial inflation we're seeing now is penny ante compared to the inflation we're going to get, which means the stock market, inflation is never good.
I
Inflation's
benefited
never
from
good.
inflation in
Yeah, when you had 15, 18% interest rates.
I had the
Right,
interest
but
rate,
before we get
I
15% interest
bonds.
rates, we're gonna have a total crash of the stock market.
What I don't understand is why, with all that pumping of money and printing of money over 8 years, why wasn't there a massive inflation?
Because the money never got to the marketplace.
Where did it go?
It went to, first of all, it went to everyone who was buying treasury
Real
bonds.
estate, too.
And entered the stock market, because with all that money being created, of course, it's exactly what I was just talking about. It's one of the ways government doesn't destroy the economy, government pumps the economy up by pumping money into the economy. More money means more demand. More demand means rising prices and everything. But all the money, first of all, it went into the stock market, into the marketplace where prices would have gone up had it gone there. Now it's starting to go there, coming out of financial markets going into the marketplace, and we are getting inflation. Or it went to the companies who are making their profit overseas, escaping for American markets for their lives, and a lot of that money was kept
I get
overseas,
it.
never went back here. More money went to buy the treasury notes, bonds, and bills, and pumped up the stock market, and there are 3 or 4 other places the money went, but not into the market. It's not one for one. Federal Reserve pumps
So,
$100
clear,
in.
you're not against tax cuts,
Of course not.
but you don't think they're gonna have the effect that I.
Exactly. It's dealing with details, and in the condition we are in, details is not going to save the
Jerome, you're missing 2 things.
Okay,
In this
I
country,
gotta start my talk.
many of the banks are foreign owned right now. And the money here is going overseas to those
Very
foreign
good.
countries.
Another factor. I never even considered that.
Santander, HSBC is Hong Kong,
Sure,
whatever.
yes,
but-
Every one of these banks is
Yeah.
now
but
foreign
didn't
owned.
Trump engage in repatriation, or are we bringing
Now
money back?
that's corporate.
Yeah, that's
money.
what's creating inflation. That's one of the factors that are creating inflation. Now the money is coming back here and into the market. Okay,
Wait, I might suggest Jerry Buck begin his talk. Nobody, he just said it.
and let me
If you have
explain.
any questions for him, please hold until he's finished. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Jerry,
thank
go ahead.
you, Lawrence,
Go ahead.
thank you very much. And I love friendly disagreement.
Sure.
They're my favorite thing in the world.
Well, I'll tell you
okay.
one thing. John Adams said the only kind of conversation worth having is an argument.
He did?
Yes.
John Adams?
Lawrence,
Yes.
don't worry.
Yeah.
Can we begin the talk?
Okay, first of all, here is what this talk is about. It is not about policy, that is behind me. It's about a specific recommendation, a way in which every one of us in this room can help rescue our country for the sake of our children, our grandchildren, and so forth. Something very specific, very practical, we can all do, besides meeting and sharing our values and ideas at places like this, that we can do to help this country survive and rescue future generations, and rescue ourselves so there will be future generations. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do now, and I'm going to make my recommendation very specific, very practical, not anything abstract. Okay. The first thing I'm going to do is indicate what the stakes are in the coming election, which we've already broached, the midterm election and also Donald Trump's re-election bid. What the stakes are, what's at stake in these 2 coming elections. Second, I'm going to summarize what, in my opinion, are the prospects for Republican success in November 2018 and in Donald Trump's success. What is in his favor, what is against him. Then I'm going to indicate who I believe we need to speak to as often as possible, what they need to hear, and lastly, what it is we can appeal to on the part of this population to get them on our side, to get them actively engaged. Who are the they? The same people who put Donald Trump in the White House, the forgotten men and women of the country. In my view, they are the only social force that can save us from what is to come if more progressives are elected, get more power, get more confidence in their ability to take the country over. The forgotten men and women, they are basically the target of this talk. And they are potential allies, allies of ours. And if nothing else proved that, Donald Trump's election in 2016 should be enough proof. Against all of the media who told Americans who they should vote for, against all of the national polling organizations who told us all who American voters would vote for, the forgotten men and women of this country went to the polls and dashed all the hopes of the media and of the polling organizations and they are the forgotten men and women. What makes them forgotten? The national polling organizations didn't think of them long enough to even take a survey of who they want to vote for. They really were forgotten. Okay, now, what are the stakes? Well, and just we should all remember how blessed we are that Hillary Clinton did not enter the White House in January. I think Scott said that we would not have survived her election, and we would not have. Now what is coming out, what is being exposed, what Comey did, and what Strzok did, and Lisa Page, and a bunch of them, Weinstein.
None of which would have heard.
McCabe, what they did, even with the country watching them, now with what they would have been able to do, it would have been over. The country would have been doomed. So that was very, very important. Now, but how about for November 2018? Well, if the Democrats take a majority in either of the two houses of Congress, if they get hold of the majority, there will be only one item on the national agenda, and that is Donald Trump's impeachment. Not another thing will come across any committee, because if the Democrats take over, it becomes a Democratic chair of every committee in Congress, of every subcommittee in Congress. And as we already know, there's nothing that takes precedence over getting rid of and destroying Donald Trump. So that's basically what happens. And even if the Democrats don't take over, if they gain a significant number of seats, that will bolster the confidence and the bravado, the brazenness of the Democrats in going forward. Even though we in New York cannot do anything to get rid of Schumer and get rid of
Shell is going to defeat Gillibrand.
Okay. There are two possibilities. Either she will or she won't.
She has lots of money. She does.
Okay.
She's
Well,
the RNC finance chair.
I'm with Glenn. Name recognition is the name of the game.
Shell
Okay, at any rate, so on the other hand, if, and can you imagine, this has to be our goal, this has to be our prime directive, to give the U.S. Senate a sufficient majority. We need to elect 9 more senators in the country to replace Democrat with Republicans, and then Donald Trump gets his agenda. He gets it all. He gets full funding for the border wall. He gets his immigration policies. He gets a complete end to sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. He gets what he really desires, a reduction of spending, which he's been doing to the extent he can on his own. A complete elimination, which is what I'm hoping for, a complete reduction and elimination of entire federal agencies and bureaus, and a couple of departments as well. And I believe if he has that kind of majority, I don't think he's going to get his anti-filibuster rule, 51 to pass anything in the Senate. But if he gets a essentially Democratic veto-proof majority of 60 votes in the Senate, it's amazing what he will do. The only reason that I am not really upset with this $1.3 trillion supplemental appropriation is that he couldn't do more with the establishment running the Republican Party in the Senate. Get rid of some more of these establishment Republicans. Put pro-Trump Republicans on important committees. Get a Freedom Caucus, not just in the House, but in the Senate. And I think it is amazing how this country can heal and how fast it can come back from the dead. So that's what's at stake in this election. What are the chances? Well, we can't figure out who the media is going to support, or the college professors who knows how they're going to tell their students to vote, right? So we have all these headwinds against us, and they are quite rough and tough.